Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week I'm trying to get the Cyclekart onto four wheels. See you in a minute. Right, so I've had several weeks really on and off vacillating about what to do about the back end and quite how I do things. I've got to mount this big cross member at the back of the bulkhead behind the seat. That is now drilled out, ready to take the bolts, so that's ready to go in now. And I think what I'm going to do all along, I've been unsure as to whether I went straight back with a pair of supports off that to take the back axle, or whether or not I run the back axle off the frame rails. And in the end, although it's not quite right, I think I can dummy up all the springs on the back of the 7 to hide the fact that it's basically a bearing and keep them on that rail. It's not ideal aesthetically, but it's behind the wheel anyway, and practically I think it gives me a wider spread to carry the rear axle between the bearings, which is good. And also, more importantly, in this crucial sort of area here in the tail, it's giving me a lot more room for motor and chain wheel, because there isn't a lot of room at all. So anything I can grab I will, rather than having straight bits of rail and bushes and things like that. So it's time, I think, to basically strip the whole thing down, get back to my bare frame rails, probably split them off the frame, take the whole frame apart again, mark where these are going to go, which I'm just waiting for some billet aluminium to do these spacers. And then it means once I've got that done, I'll just cut both these frame rails to length, put the chamfer on the end, and then the whole of the chassis can be finished. As far as the wheels are concerned, I can, when the billet aluminium arrives, I can do the spacers and basically bolt the back axle in, which is something I've not been able to do yet. That means it'll be on 4 wheels and we'll be able to start and tackle the motor. So that's the task for the day, I think, to get this lot tidied up, get everything out of the way. I might turn it round because now I'm working on the back end. I could do with it being at the other end where I can get at it more easily, and strip it down, get it right, get it chopped to size, drill the holes for the cross member, and put the floor back into the bulkhead cockpit bit, get that cut down to shape, and then we can start and mount the seat back and things like that properly. And the bulkhead rail is now all drilled, and there are 2 tapped holes in that ready to go. The only thing that will need altering on that, I think, is that protrudes above the chassis rail level by 40mm for that top one. That will need cutting back slightly for where the tail section comes into the bulkhead, but I'll worry about that later on. Right, bit of an unbox today. It's slightly odd that it says it's fragile, and you see what it is. This is for the last bit on the chassis, really. Don't really think there's much that's fragile about a solid chunk of aluminium, but that's the support for the rear axle. Just got to be cut in half and we can get that installed now. So the next thing to do is to take this block of aluminium and cut it in half. Now we go on the bandsaw rather than the mitre saw, mainly because it's less inclined to throw bits all across the workshop, but it might struggle, we'll see. go. Just shows you don't need big expensive machinery. Little tiny bandsaw. We're cutting up nearly 2-inch chunks of aluminium. There we go. That will be ready for putting the axle and the transmission on. It's about the position it'll be in. Just got to tidy all that lot up and clean it up, but that should fall just outside the main body line. Might chop the frame rails off at that level as well, but we'll wait and see. You know, if I need to just move things back a bit, I can without too much disruption. Now I think this is the last part of the cart that I need to get into a rolling chassis. It's just been delivered. It's the big bolts to hold the blocks of aluminium and the actual bearings down to the chassis. So hopefully this will go through the top of the bearing and through the block, which I've got to drill, do that next, and through the chassis rails, which are 80mm. That should leave me a little bit of room to tighten up. Yeah, 80mm comes to about there, so I might have to trim a little bit off the end of it, because otherwise I'm going to lose quite a lot of ground clearance. Right, so we got the holes drilled. I've drilled them out at 12.5mm to give me clearance. I tried it with 12 and it would have needed a hammer to put them in, I think, but that will then work. Those go on top of the chassis rails. I'll probably clamp these on top of the chassis rails and then use them as a guide to get the drill started, because it's got to go into the actual recess of the top of the frame rail, so it may be a bit of a problem, I don't know. So the aluminium billet is drilled out, ready for the bolts. The only thing that needs doing there is the frame, and hopefully this will be a fairly substantial milestone today. The aim is, by the end of the day, I want to see this on 4 wheels, which shouldn't take too long. But we know these things don't always go right. I'm going to move it outside onto the drive, because trying to drill down with a fair bit of precision on up here in the air is going to be a bit of a problem, I think. So I'm going to put a couple of workhorses up outside, get the chassis rails onto that, get that drilled out, and then drop it down onto the deck and get it onto 4 wheels if I can. If I can achieve that, we are sort of a quarter of the way to getting a running rolling chassis, and I say that in that there are 3 other things I need to get done after that, and they're not as big as, if you like, getting it to this stage. The first one is fairly straightforward, I hope and think, and that will be just to connect the steering linkage through the column, pitman arm up to the steering on the axle ends. So that's stage 1. Stage 2 will be to get a motor fitted and the transmission lined up and ready to drive the back axle, which once I've got it on 4 wheels I can see where I'm going a bit more. So that'll be stage 2. And last but not least will be to actually connect me to the rest of the cart, which will be the pedals set up and the means of stopping it, because there's no brake arrangement at the moment. So that's it, that's the 4 stages. Let's see if we can't get the first one done today, and I'll just put the camera up and put a bit of time lapse on, and we'll see how we get on with it. Okay, so that's a huge step forward really. There's not a lot of work in it, but it is, as I said at the beginning, a fairly major milestone in that we now have a rolling chassis of sorts. I have got now, as I say, the rolling chassis. The other thing that's come out of it is I put the sides on and the back to climb in and out of it. This length from bulkhead to cockpit cowl is fine, and it's still doable. It's okay. The width of the thing is what's caught me out. It is still a little bit too narrow, I think. So I may spend a little bit of time just seeing if I can tweak another inch or two on the width without it looking too out of place. I think I've already pinched about 40 or 50 mil on the cockpit width, but if I keep that tapering out going slightly towards the back instead of just keeping it going square on as it is at the moment, I think I may make it slightly more comfortable to work with. But that's something to look at for the future, and it's not something that can't be fixed later on. It's only when I get to the point of having to make the tail that I've really got to worry about that, and that will probably be almost the last thing I do on this, I think, because until it's running with an engine in it and everything else, I can't really see where the tail's going. So good morning. Very happy with that. Time now to make a start and think about where I need rails coming out to mount the motor, how I mount the motor, what room I've got, and that's why I've put it back in here that way around, so I can actually get at that now and see how we get on with that. So there we go. Hope that was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next time. We'll be doing something different on the Cyclekart, and I'll see you then. Bye.